Am I correct in assuming that most wedding creatives in America should be setting
Right.
their business up as an LLC?
It's a no-brainer. I can't imagine the rationalization of why you'd want to be a sole proprietor. You're opening yourself up to a lot of unnecessary risks. An LLC is essentially created for ease of setup. What gets very confusing is an LLC is flexible on the tax side. As an LLC, yeah, you can elect to be sole proprietor, partnership, or an S corporation. So it's super flexible.
I'ma get right in my bag. Why you gonna try to get mad? Everybody wanna keep up. Don't you know I move too fast? I'ma zip right past. Drip all on my swag.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Wedding Film School Show. My name is Jared, and we have another amazing episode for you today. I am joined again by Mr. Jason McCutcheon.
Yeah.
And today, like I said, we have an awesome guest. Do you want to introduce our guest today, Jay?
Yeah. So I saw this post the other day in a Facebook group, and it was just somebody who was like, hey, I'm a CPA, but also a wedding filmmaker, and I thought I would do something. And I honestly have been trying to find a CPA for a while. And so I was like, hey, come on the show. So we have Evan Barbare today from Camera Dad CPA. He's a filmmaker and he's a CPA. So I think that's a really, really, really cool combo. Something that I'm really excited about. But before we get into that, do you want to talk a little gear really quick? Because you got something that you're really excited about.
Yeah, I mean, when you run a production studio, you get packages, and a lot
It's
of
the
times,
simple things too.
a lot of times you forget what you order. And so today was one of those days, and I ordered this probably like 2 weeks ago. Thanks B&H, 2 weeks turnaround time.
2 week turnaround. It's only 3 hours away. It took them 2 weeks to
Yeah.
drive 3 hours.
So we maybe like other wedding videographers run a couple different businesses under the same roof, and one of them is a photo booth, which is a complete nightmare and terror every time we send it out because it's the hardest thing in the world to do.
It's so turnkey.
Oh yeah, you just turn it on and it goes. Not necessarily, but I got a couple new things in because we just turned on our photo booth and it's like literally flashing lights and like warning me and all these things. So I've been trying to calm that thing down, and we actually got a new photo booth. So just trying to get everything settled. It's been a nightmare. But I finally got a dedicated tool called essentially a fancy box cutter for just cutting paper, which it's probably my new favorite thing as of today.
Well, it's specifically a background paper cutter. So
Yes.
what's funny about the reason I bring it up is mainly because I think this is a thing in our industry. There's always a single tool to do almost any stupid thing.
Yeah.
I wonder what some of the people who are listening, what their favorite single use tool is.
But then I opened it and it didn't really cut very well. So I'm kind of
Maybe it only can cut backgrounds.
But then I cut the box for my newest favorite thing because this was over in about 5 seconds, and I got the DMP wireless connect module.
What model number is that? I've been kind of tracking that one. It's pretty exciting.
The model number? Oh yeah, it's the new one.
The new one.
And it's funny because I opened this with my box cutter and it's just all.
And now it's
gunky.
ruined and filled with glue.
Yeah, I'm like, this
Great
isn't
job,
very
Jared.
effective. But yeah, I opened this and Jason was like, "Oh yeah, that will work," because literally printing out of an iPad is like.
Yeah, this
The
will
worst
work
thing ever.
one time, and then the second you give it to one of our team members, they get on site, they're gonna call you. Jared, the wireless printing doesn't work. It's like when you buy your data printer for Christmas.
Yeah, and you essentially plug this into the back of a printer from 10 years ago, and it will supposedly air print.
Allegedly.
But you also have to charge this piece in addition to your printer. So I'm excited about that.
Hey, this isn't turning on. This is exactly how I predicted it.
Yeah.
Anyway, wedding photo booths are awesome. So definitely
very challenging.
Easy
it's not
money.
turnkey.
Not turnkey.
But it can be rewarding. Jay does not want to continue it, but I'm holding strong.
I do like money. So
Yeah.
speaking of money, we got an awesome guest today who deals with money specifically. So hey, Evan, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How are y'all doing?
Doing awesome. So like I said, I saw your post in the Facebook group. Watch your video, which you should definitely go check. Tell everybody about your channel.
So it's called Camera Dad CPA, and mostly what we're going to cover there is just financial topics that really more so relate to the creative. So photographer, videographer, I'm honing into those skill sets and just trying to kind of bridge the gap between creative knowledge as well as financial knowledge.
So you're not just like you're not just a one-trick pony, Evan. You're not just some CPA. You tell everybody about your wedding creative business.
Yeah, absolutely. So we kind of started off in the family side, very early on, mostly doing family portraits, things like that. Well, we quickly got into just over time, moved into the more video space. And that was just in combination of me shooting for my wife, who owns a business as well, that, she was required to create some content on that front. So just kind of segued into that. And then at this point, now the weekends, we predominantly shoot weddings, photo and video for most of them. So it's quickly spiraled out of control.
Yes, as it does. This isn't like business advice, Jared, but it is like, I do often feel like if you're just like pretty good at what you do and nice to people, you can like just, it seems to like, I hear that story all the time. Like, oh, we started shooting and now we can't control the volume. Like it does happen.
Yeah.
Not in every market, you're not always doing something wrong, but I've heard that story so many times. Is like people who just like, we should try this, and then suddenly they can't even keep up with the volume.
Definitely the story for us, yeah, because I picked up a camera to start shooting better, pictures of the kids and all that, and then all of a sudden, next thing you know, we're shooting weddings. So people will be like, "How did you get here?" And I'll be like, "Really have to think back because it happened so quickly."
Yeah. Totally. Yeah, I mean, how many planners have we seen go from a client of ours to like, hey, I really enjoyed planning my wedding. I'm just going to start planning other people's weddings. And they're just the nicest people in the world. And then all of a sudden they're like full-time wedding planners. Luxury market charging a lot of money.
That industry, man, gets a hold on you.
Yeah.
It's just interesting like that.
And for us, like it was definitely the way, like we started in 2010, Evan. And it was like, we just essentially got into weddings because we were nerdy and wanted to buy like camera equipment. And we were like, well, yeah, maybe we can pay this off by doing like 3 or 4 weddings, and then we'll be able to go.
That was our exit strategy.
Yeah, then we'll just be able to,
we're gonna do 3 or 4 and get out.
Yeah, exactly. And then we
probably would have been happy with. We would if I would have just owned the cameras, I would have been happy.
Yeah, exactly. And then it was like, well, maybe we could make more actual money. Like maybe it wasn't even like we could make careers, but then it slowly became like, now we're doing this.
We ran the most pathetic business in the world for at least 3 years.
Yeah.
And so,
really?
So I will say, like, when we speak from experience and speak with confidence, we're really speaking from like, don't do what we did. We were stupid.
Right.
So speaking of stupidity, the other thing that
wedding creatives,
big idiots. No, actually, I think they're brilliant actually in a lot of ways because they've found a way to own their own business and control their own destiny. But one of the things we are not the best at oftentimes is finances.
Yeah.
Because when you get started, you kind of just go. You want to make what you want to make, and that's it. So
and when it comes to kind of the important things, it's like, we don't really look to become good at it or look for help until it's like, I need this person or I need this thing. Like, so I think that's a benefit of your channel in my mind, Evan, is like, creative. If you're at home and you're like, I'll get to that later. I'll get to my, CPA business. I'll get to my, lawyer at a later date.
Sure.
Not putting it off until you absolutely need to look for it and get this squared away.
Why don't we really quick not assume everyone knows what a CPA is?
Sure.
What is a CPA? Why don't you kind of define what that is?
So a CPA is a certified public accountant. So basically, it's that's the route that you can go when you study accounting, and then from there in school, you're basically taking a test at the once you've reached the right level of credibility in terms of academic performance and things like that. You're essentially taking a test that's 4 parts. There's a number of other requirements as well, but it's just, you can be an accountant and not be a CPA, but not all accountants are CPAs. So it's just kind of a designation that's given to people that have passed that exam and are said to, essentially know what they're talking about.
Well, and are you legally required to like actually do a good job?
Yes, yeah. I mean, so if I were to go and do a bad job, yeah, it can come back to haunt me for sure. It's kind of similar to a lawyer, and then they could get disbarred,
Or a
but I could
fiduciary.
also lose my license. Yeah, yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. And we'll get into some more of that as well. But yeah, you definitely there's a lot of requirements. Personal liability as well as they can come after your license as well.
I don't understand why more people don't just get a CPA. Like, it's not that expensive.
Yeah, it's really not. And that's honestly sometimes my biggest advice, because it depends on the route you're going with this. If you've got a business, and in the beginning it's sometimes easy, sometimes not, but the worst thing you can do is let it run for 5-10 years, and then all of a sudden you've got this mess. So in a lot of cases I do feel like that's the right route, but you can definitely take kind of some steps in the meantime, just to kind of prepare you to talk to that CPA and all that stuff. And, like you guys were mentioning before, you definitely get into this scenario where even I found myself in, where I'm like, I'm going to do this as a hobby. And then all of a sudden, we're taking on pretty big wedding clients and things like that. So I think that's just the natural progression of a good creative, is that you go from 0 to 100 really fast. All of a sudden you might be shooting a family portrait, and the next thing you're shooting a $6,000 wedding or so. So
Yep.
definitely unique to creatives, I think, in that space.
Well, like, adding $60,000 to $100,000 of income to your like life is not a small thing,
It's
and
not. No.
you need to make sure that you're doing it the right way. So I think a CPA is great. We've had a CPA for many years. Different.
Sure.
Some we definitely have escalated our usage. Now we honestly talk to our CPA 2 to 3 times a month now.
Right.
They do everything for us on a monthly basis. They help us with our payroll. They help us with our financial planning people. They don't do all the things. They just make sure that, like, this is the person you should work for, and they work with me, and they'll make sure that, like, your 401k is tracked properly. And it's
Absolutely.
it's so much more than just do your taxes at the end of the year. The more your business grows, I literally don't think anyone running a business that's making over $500,000 can do the finances.
No, yeah.
I think you
exactly.
need to
100% agree.
because when you're doing finances, this is just one of our things we'll always talk about on the show. Whatever you're doing, you're choosing not to do something else.
100%. Yeah, you've got to sit there and evaluate, because even for me, I mean, it can even come down from an editing perspective. We don't come across this a ton in the wedding space, but let's say you're doing some Fusion graphics or After Effects graphics. Yeah, I edit in DaVinci Resolve. So.
Nice.
But it's one of those things where you just got to sit back and do kind of an analysis. Like, does it make sense for me to try to learn this and do this right now? Same thing on the CPA
and what's the
side.
risk? The risk with anything financial is very. Last year, I'll give a little story. The CPA tells me about these things, and sometimes I do them and sometimes I don't. And I went to my unemployment tax area for the state.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, shoot. And I was like, oh, I got to pay this $8,000 tax bill. Like, luckily, I mean, we just had the money aside, but, like, I totally forgot about it. And for some people, like, those kind of little things popping up in your business can really, really hurt you.
Sure.
Do that for 5 years in a row, and then you're really screwed.
Yeah, you start talking like interest and penalties and all that stuff. Yeah, it can amount to something very quickly. I mean, even within a year, I've got friends who, not necessarily in the wedding space, but just in their own business, they kind of ran into the same scenario, ran into a lot of success at the end of the year, and all of a sudden we're looking at, $20,000 tax bill at the end of the year that you didn't expect. So it can put it, but it's hard in the creative space too, because, like, even for myself, I mean, there's a lot of fun stuff that you can buy, like cameras, lenses, all that. It's a lot of fun. So it's hard to focus on the financial aspects. I think we're unique in that industry in that, there's a lot of stuff you can spend your money on in this industry. That's exciting, but it's hard to devote that time and, the resources to hire a CPA or something like that.
So we kind of talked a little bit about your journey, but why did you decide to kind of move? You've been a CPA for how long?
So I've been a CPA now for 5 years.
Mhm.
Yeah, 5 years.
And
now.
then how long have you been making wedding films?
So we've been making wedding films for about the past year and a half.
So that's an interesting kind of transition, right?
It is. Yeah, that's right. So, like I was saying before, we just, I picked up a camera and I've always kind of fallen in love with it. Even from when I was in college, I was always kind of that guy with a camera. Always had a passion for it. And really, I would say the artist side came first. Back in college, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. I just kind of fell into accounting. My mom was at her CPA's office and I was undecided as a major. And, I was like, well, I could always be a CPA and kind of do the fun stuff on the side. And that's where we're at now.
Nice.
If you're like me, you know that music can literally make or break a wedding film. And finding that perfect song can be a frustrating and time-consuming process. You need a song that drives your story forward, leaves space for your audio and images to breathe, builds up over time, and is just plain good. No fear, MusicBed has your back. I've literally been using MusicBed since they started in like 2011 or something, and they have been my go-to music licensing site ever since. I've used the other sites that you see floating around, but time and time again, I find myself coming back to MusicBed for the incredible quality of music across the board, their sheer volume of their library, and their killer customer support. And to make it even better, they offer an incredibly cost-effective monthly membership with unlimited song licenses for your wedding films. If you aren't already using MusicBed, you are seriously doing yourself a disservice, but you don't have to take my word for how awesome this company is. You can grab a free month-long membership by following the link in our description. So head on over, sign up for a free month, explore their library, and use them for your next wedding film. You'll be glad you did.
So one of the things we talk about a lot, and we'll just get right into this deep stuff. One of the things I talk to creatives about the most is just their business designation in terms of how they're like filing their taxes and how their business is set up. And people are always like, I'm a sole prop. And like my experience is always like, no, why is anyone a sole prop? No one should do that. You should at least set up an LLC. Am I correct in assuming that most wedding creatives in America, if you're out overseas, I guess I can't speak towards that, but in America should be setting their business up as an LLC?
Yeah, so I agree with that from a couple of standpoints. The main thing is I'll just give you a couple of examples. I've now set up 2 LLCs, one for my wife and her business, and one for my photography and videography business. The second one, because the system's even easier now, it took me 24 hours. I think it was $150. So for me, like if we're talking $150, that's essentially going to protect me from additional risk. It's a no-brainer. I can't imagine the rationalization of why you'd want to be a sole proprietor, especially when you're going out and shooting weddings. You never know what you're going to run into. Not to say that injuries common or anything like that, but just you're opening yourself up to a lot of, I think, unnecessary risks. And, an LLC is essentially created for ease of setup. If you were looking at a corporation or something like that, we're talking about a whole nother ballgame.
Yep.
But I personally can't think of a reason why somebody would not set up an LLC.
I think probably because they don't know what it is, right, Jared?
I know when we first started our company, we were like, we got what was it?
Like LegalZoom or
Legal
something.
Zoom. Yeah. We got LegalZoom, right? And it was like it's like a corporation in a box. You get all this stuff, and we were like, well, I think the only reason why we probably didn't start a sole prop was because we were like, well, we're 2 owners, so
I said,
we couldn't be a sole.
No, look, I'll actually tell you the truth. I was like, I want a corporation.
Yeah, sounds way cooler.
I was like, that's cool.
Yeah.
And so I was like,
It sounds good.
Yeah.
It
What's
sounds
the
cool.
right corporation? S Corp. I'm gonna do S Corp.
Because doesn't S stand for a special corp?
It's actually the IRS code that designates an S corporation, which I think that's people's biggest confusion about what an LLC is. So everybody says I'm a sole proprietor.
Yeah.
Well, as an LLC, you can be a sole proprietor. So we're looking at, an LLC is flexible from multiple avenues. I think the biggest thing is, people just get that confusion. You can be a sole proprietor and not an LLC. You can be an LLC and a sole proprietor at the same time.
And you can be an LLC and an S Corp.
Yes. So you can essentially, the way it works is you're looking at it from 2 different perspectives. And this is probably, I think, most people's, confusion when they go and they look at, what should I create my company, or how should I create and structure my company? So they're going to go to an article, and then it's going to start talking about an LLC, a corporation, and it's going to mix talking about the legal structure as well as the tax structure. What gets very confusing is an LLC is flexible on the tax side. So, one thing, that we had talked about a little bit before we got on here, but as an LLC, yeah, you can elect to be a sole proprietor, a partnership, or an S corporation. So it's super flexible.
Yeah.
From what my understanding of the whole corporation side is, it's really going to protect your personal assets, right? Like that's the main reason why you're going to want to move into the world of an LLC or a corporation. And I don't think people really understand that side of things. Is like,
Well,
if
they
you
always think
screw
about
up-
getting sued.
Right.
Well, yeah,
That's all they
a
think
part
about.
of it.
But it's not, to me, that's not the number one benefit. Because it's like, you're probably not going to get sued.
Yeah.
In the wedding world,
It's not
probably
likely,
not.
but you could,
Yeah.
I guess. But yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Likelihood probably is pretty low.
That's why they probably make it unimportant, though, I think. Because they're like, I'm not going to get sued.
Yeah.
And they're probably right.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we've started doing, we read a book called Profit First.
Yeah.
And that's really helped us a lot. Because now we
awesome.
save money for things, which is good. Like
That's right.
taxes. Like we don't really have unexpected bills anymore because we budget the bills. Even the things that we don't know, because we're using percentages. That's the thing, is like if you're trying to totally understand, what are my taxes going to be? That's kind of tricky. So, but the other thing that we started doing, because we are an S Corp, paying ourselves a salary, but also doing distributions, instead of just taking all the money we want to make in the company and putting it in our salaries, which means you have to pay payroll tax, you're able to do a large amount as a distribution, which is already taxed because you paid it through the corporation. So that, and if you're hearing what I'm saying, maybe you can make that simpler for people. But is that a structure that could work for more wedding creatives if they understood how to work it?
I think so. Yeah. So I'll kind of back up and explain where you're going with that. And so to start, for a lot of people, let's say, the sole proprietor that currently is not an LLC. So the way that works is when they go out and they shoot a wedding and they bring in money, that rolls directly into their personal income tax return. Same thing if you create an LLC and you elect to go the sole proprietor route. All the money that you're earning as a business is disregarded as an entity, and you are going to claim that on your own tax returns. So, essentially, for tax purposes, an LLC that's a sole proprietor, there is no separate business. You and the business are the same for tax purposes, not for a legal structure. So that gets, I know that, somebody that, I've had friends that have asked me that question before, and it's super confusing when you read that because IRS doesn't even look at that as a business entity. Now, let's say you go the route and you want to, do what essentially you're talking about, where you create an LLC, and then from there you elect to be treated as an S corporation. So the situation we were mentioning before, all the money that you earn as a business is subject to self-employment tax. Now, let's say you go the S corp election. Now you have the IRS does look at your company as a separate company. It'll have its own tax return, and you essentially are an employee of the company. So then from there, you're making the decision to pay yourself a certain salary, and that portion is going to be subject to self-employment tax, all the taxes. Right.
Unless
And
you have
then
multiple
from there-
owners, in which case you just pay payroll tax.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So payroll tax. So yeah, if you're the owner yourself, it looks different. But yeah, if you have actual employees, then it looks differently on that front. And then from there, the distribution in excess of what you're paying yourself as a salary, that's where kind of the tax benefit, boils down to. So you're able to pay yourself money that is considered a distribution, and that is just essentially subject to less taxes.
Yeah. And so
And, yeah.
is there any reason why other people shouldn't or couldn't be doing this? Like, what's the catch?
So the catch there, I would say, is complexity. But, like we had mentioned before, you're more than likely, when you get to this point and you're at that level in your business, you're more than likely going to have a CPA anyways. But, I will say the only catch to that is, like I mentioned before, complexity. So you're now filing a separate tax return. So I think, the biggest caveat there is going to be somebody that maybe does this as a part-time wedding filmmaker. I feel like there's a decent amount of people in that space. The less money you're bringing in for your business, obviously, the less amount of tax advantages and savings you're going to have there. So you're going to have to figure out, does it make sense to go through the complexity of that, hire a CPA or a financial advisor? And, that's just something you're going to have to make the call on, because one of the other aspects, you have a separate tax return for your company. Then you also have to file payroll tax returns, even if you're a single member LLC or a single member S Corp. So at that point, you're now filing a separate tax return, payroll tax returns, and then the IRS kind of has a hot button in that regard, and that's what you're paying yourself as a salary, because they're smart and they know that
They know the
you're
trick.
going to want to say. They know the trick. They know that you're going to want to say, "Oh, I make $10 an hour. I'm just clicking a button and all that stuff." Well, they're going to come in and they're going to say, "You're doing some marketing. You're also out shooting. You're a boss. You're running a business. You're probably making, let's say, $100 an hour." They're going to try to push that up as much as they possibly can.
Here's the key with all finances: don't be greedy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Just be reasonable.
People will definitely
Right.
push it. I think the wording technically is give yourself a reasonable salary. So it's
Reasonable
like-
salary, which means it's funny when they say that, because everybody believes they're reasonable,
Yeah.
right? So
Totally.
you never meet somebody that's like, "Oh, I'm unreasonable."
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Well, I think
that's the tricky thing there.
it comes down to like the way we do it, and I'm not a financial expert, but we haven't been audited or sued, so
Yeah. That's good.
is we pretty much go, okay, we look up photographer, what is their average salary, which is what they're going to do.
Right.
I mean, that's you set your salary, and it doesn't matter if I want it to be lower. I'm not going
right.
to do that, because the government is at least smart enough to go and Google search average salary of photographer. So I think if
They
you're
do.
wondering
That's right.
what to do, I think this helps in a couple ways, in my opinion. I think no matter what, paying yourself a salary, and this is just my opinion of running a business, is like that is how you should be doing it, because how else are you supposed to know what your excess is? Like,
Right.
how do you know
Sure.
how much you can invest? How do you know how much you can pay for your marketing? All these things. But of course, at the end of the day, how much can I pay myself in distributions? And like just funny money that you're really like, that puts you over the top as profitability. I've always heard basically you don't want it to get over 1-to-1.
Yeah. I
Like
can see
pretty
that.
much like if you're making like 100,000, and obviously it changes the more money you make. Like if you're running a multi-million-dollar corporation and you pay yourself a $200,000 salary and do like $500,000 in distributions, they're probably not going to look at that, because you're not making, you're paying yourself such a big salary. But at the lower levels, for most of us in the wedding film industry, you're going to pay yourself a pretty small to reasonable salary. And if you want more security, maybe you pay yourself a little more. But and they just know, like, maybe a common scenario might be you pay yourself $50,000 salary, and at the end of the year, after you've paid for everything, you have 15, 20 grand profit. And that's after you've budgeted for your marketing next year and all the things you need to do. You pay yourself that 20 grand. Like, that's a very common scenario. If you're wondering, how does that work itself out? Something like that is probably how I see it working for a lot of wedding creatives. Maybe you're pulling in 120 grand gross.
And it gets even simpler for, you guys, I think, have multiple employees and things like that. I think for the vast majority of filmmakers out there, they're going to probably be the only employee of their company. I think, that's certainly going to vary. But then that at that point becomes very easy, because you're not dividing that by your partners or, owners of the company. And it's very clean cut and easy to see, especially if you have a separate business checking account or something like that. You're able to monitor what that cash is, as well as if you're budgeting, you can very much so see the ups and downs of that amount, which, I think that's another, just to kind of hit on that a little bit. And to even allude to what we were talking about before with LLCs and all of that, as well as just being able to separately manage your finances, is keeping everything separate. So an LLC is only going to protect you if you keep everything separate. So that's just kind of a point there as well.
Yep.
So generally, what are some of the biggest mistakes that you see wedding creatives make in this world?
Yeah, and I think it boils down to kind of why I started my channel, is because I think for the most part, creatives, they have a great understanding of what vision they have for their videos, their photos, and all of that, but they don't run their company like a business. It's more so run like they're chasing, whatever creative vision they have, but they're not thinking about this as a way to make profit, provide for their family. And, if you run it from the perspective of you're running a business, you are trying to generate a profit, that you can do both. You can create great wedding films, but you can also, take the same measures that most other businesses take in budgeting, having a strategic objective as you move along. So that very much so puts you as a future focused company instead of just chasing what the next gig is.
I love that, future focused company. That's a great way to say it.
Yeah,
That is great because essentially once you figure it out, I think people think of it as like, oh man, I have to do these numbers every single year. But like essentially once you figure out a good structure, this is going to help you the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years in your business. So you just figure out the right structure. Maybe you make little adjustments over time, but people I don't think are more focused on, okay, I need to do better color correction. And honestly, that isn't the thing that's going to make you more money long term. Like these are the things that are going to save you.
Having more money will make you more money.
Yeah, it's going to save you thousands of dollars every single year for the next 10 years. Compound that, and it, that's the thing about money is it compounds.
Well, and I was going to say too, with the biggest thing is that information is definitely power. So, I think for me, one of the reasons we more so got into shooting weddings is because that's where the money is, and obviously you can see that in big numbers. But just from a pure profit perspective, I don't think people sit there and take the right amount of time to analyze how much time they're spending on various gigs. For example, before, me personally, we were chasing down these smaller family gigs. I was running all over, the city and everything. I was traveling there, shooting for an hour, and I was done. But when you really add up, your travel time, and you look at your time as an opportunity to make money elsewhere, that really starts to put in perspective, all right, what sort of gigs do I need to be chasing? So I think tracking this tracking this information from a couple levels, even from tracking this from a financial perspective will also help you see that even just if you were to break this information out and then you sit there and look back at how much time you spend on each of these gigs, that really puts into perspective what your most profitable areas are in your business too.
Yep. Yeah, well, and the good thing is, like, wedding filmmaking is actually very profitable.
Yeah.
It can be very profitable. I think most people, even people running their business poorly, are running profitable businesses. They probably are. What I see is most of them buy too much gear. So they're destroying their profitability that way. And if they thought about it like profit that they could take home and actually were paying themselves in the right way, they probably wouldn't do that. But I do think that's maybe a big thing. I also think most people, it's weird, man. If you don't think of your business as, I always talk about my business, say the business is the baby and I have to feed the baby. Your business is its own entity. It needs its own food. And businesses run off money. Right?
That's right.
And if you don't have any money for the baby's not going to be happy. So I think most people are living hand to mouth.
And what happens when the baby becomes the beast? Like,
when it grows up, it needs a babysitter.
When you first start, it's a baby. It can die at any given moment. But like once that thing becomes a beast, like you want to have chains on that thing. So it's not just like running free, running wild and destroying your life.
Yeah. It can turn to bite you.
Employees to think about. Yeah. And you've got a lot to think about in that regard for sure. So it's, and it, like we mentioned before, I think if you're doing, what you're doing well, it happens very quickly. Yeah. And all of a sudden, most of these creatives all of a sudden find themselves in these positions where, they've got maybe a couple employees and they're shooting, who knows how many weddings per year. So it just very quickly happens.
I find that most people, they're wanting to run a very simple business. They want to make as much money as possible. That's great. And they don't need all the stuff that we need as a business, but like little things like the little distributions trick, like they could be taking home an extra 10 grand a year just in their pocket. Like if they were like, oh, I'm going to shoot, like, how do I make 10 more grand? Oh, I got to work 2 more weddings. No, you don't. You actually just need to structure your business properly. Well, I can't afford a CPA. Well, you could if you had 10 grand more.
Right.
So it's like this way of thinking, if you start saying like, I need to put some time and effort into this, you will find money. Like just,
I think so.
you
Yeah,
will find money.
100%.
It's like the toothpaste theory. Like you pick up the toothpaste and you look and you're like, it's empty. And we all know, like most of us have been using an empty thing of toothpaste for the last 3 weeks.
Right.
Like if you just keep squeezing it, there's probably a little more in there. And I think like the
Yeah.
effort is boring to people or intimidating to people. So maybe I was give some people some encouragement. Why should they start thinking about specifically the finances of their wedding creative business?
I think so. I think the reason they should start looking at it from that perspective is you're going to start making better financial decisions just in general. You know, if you're looking at your business from a financial perspective, you're going to start making these better decisions, and that you may even find that you get out of certain areas. You more so focus on certain, let's say, demographics in terms of, or I should say geography. So you may find that you focus on certain geographical areas. I think overall as a business, if you make smarter decisions, that's going to not only affect your company, but also your work-life balance. And that's the biggest aspect. You know, you don't want to be that person that's shooting and editing for 80 hours a week just to keep up. You just overall need to run it like a business.
Evan, I think that's such a good point. Like, because I think it does translate. Like, I know when we started making better financial decisions, it was also when I started finding my regular routine. You know, just we're really talking about discipline, right? Like having discipline as a creative, as a business owner, knowing the steps to take to just run a more efficient business. It's going to translate into the creative side too. Like I find, you know, there's a couple different types of wedding creatives. There's the one who's going to do, you know, maybe they're doing this part-time and they're a CPA on the side. Maybe it's somebody who's doing it, you know, full-time and has found a way to start doing, you know, 30, 40 weddings a year and you know, kind of do this full-time. I find the people that do it part-time are probably a little bit more disciplined than us that do it full-time, because we're just like, oh yeah, we're doing more, therefore there's more money. But the guys who are doing it part-time, they're like, hey, I have a smaller pot. Maybe I have to be a little bit more disciplined, or maybe I'm in the business world working, you know, a full-time job, and then I'm also taking on this additional work. You have to be more disciplined because you only have a set amount of time to edit, to shoot, and do whatever. That's my personal experiences. I found the people that have endless time, like have a full off season, you know, you become a little bit more complacent with your time, right? And
I think so, yeah.
I think people should be like what you said, work-life balance. I know what you mean, and I know what I mean, which is like
Right.
Not letting my work dominate me to the point where I'm not able to put things into the right order of importance in my life. I always say I prefer to say work-life boundaries.
There you go.
But because life never feels in balance. But when I hear most people say work-life balance, I'm like, most creatives are out of balance with not working enough.
Yeah.
And so like they spend no time on their actual business. They don't do marketing. They don't have a CPA. They don't plan. They don't budget. It's like, you're telling me you want, and it's like, all that means to them is travel.
Yeah.
That's pretty much what it
I
means.
agree.
It's like, oh, I'm going to go get paid this massively profitable career. Then I'm also going to buy really nice clothes and I want to travel. Work-life balance.
Right.
And it's like, oh, I mean, I think that's a great goal, by the way. Like, if you can make enough money, awesome. Like, I'm not criticizing anyone, but I will say, first things first. And until you can get your financial systems to work for you and not you working for them, that is what we're talking about here. And there's effort that needs to go into that. There's time and work. So I was going to say, what is like with wedding creatives, photographers, videographers, what's like one of the biggest tips, maybe a couple tips you would give them into keeping more of their hard-earned cash? And of course, budgeting is one of them, but what's one of the tips you would give them?
So in terms of the tips that I give them is, you know, have a more structured approach, because I think overall we see the latest flashy camera lens, something like that. And we want to chase that down because that certainly in some aspects helps us chase our creative vision. But I think having a more balanced and structured approach to that, to knowing what you're going to spend on camera gear And also taking, one of the things for me recently that I kind of did an analysis on was a NAS or a network attached storage. So I was constantly running out of space. Yeah.
You and
So I
Jay would
finally
be
got
best
one.
friends.
Yeah, so in that's kind of an example of where you can take the I was spending a lot of time copying files and
Time
things
is
like
money.
that.
You're losing
Yeah.
$100 an hour doing that, fool.
That's 100%. So if you look at your time as money, and I'm sitting here doing some administrative tasks, I'm backing up the multiple hard drives, I'm taking a hard drive over to a friend's house, something like that. That was a good example of where it was an easy decision for me because you just sit down and you look at this investment and you see how much time is it going to save me. All right, well, if I'm normally, let's say, charging $50 to $100 per hour, and I'm saying that I'm spending, say, 3 hours per week backing up something, I mean, on average, let's say that saves me $150 per week in time. That's time that I can be editing, I can be, serve my clients. And that would just be an example of looking at areas in your business. And this doesn't just have to be from a financial perspective. You can look at your business from every hour that you spend working, look at what you are doing during that time frame and figure out more efficient ways to run your business. And then you can learn to do things like, conduct a cost benefit analysis and see if it makes if it's a smart decision to move forward with.
I cannot tell you, we could not run our business without a NAS. And it seems stupid when you think like, well, why do you care? Why am I willing to drop $8,000 on my storage?
Right.
Because liability. So these are the two things I think everyone needs to be looking at is what will cost me money and what will save me money. And of course, what will make me money. I think those are the three things. It's like, if I lose my footage, how much money could I lose?
Yeah.
$500,000 easily.
Yeah.
So is it worth saving for 3-4 years, by the way, not 1 year, saving $2 million to spend $8 million? Of course it is. Anyone would do that. And so the other thing is, how long does this take? It can take 8 hours of dumping footage, but I want 3 copies. Right. Do I want a guy sitting there copying it 3 times? Do I want someone spending 5 days uploading? Do I want to keep a browser window open? So uploading something to Google Drive? No. That it's just like, okay, Google Drive.
Yeah.
Do you want infinite storage? You want to buy the Google Suite? Oh, I don't want to pay for 5 seats. You don't want to pay $25 to get infinite storage? You're that cheap?
Well, and that's the thing. I think a lot of creatives aren't sitting there, taking that analysis and they're not looking at it from a cost benefit perspective. So that's a great example because I shot a video and I was talking about, implementing some software and things like that. And I got a lot of questions like, oh, this is expensive, for example, QuickBooks or HoneyBook or something like that, just things to help you run your business. And I'm like, if I were to not have these things at this point, for one, I would be pulling my hair out. And on top of that, the amount of time that it saves me per month, just automatically sending information to clients when I get an inquiry, I think in a lot of regards, people are thinking about just that monthly bill, but they're not thinking about, let's compare it if I were to have somebody help me in my business. Let's say I started having to pay them payroll and, insurance and things like that. So I think these are ways that creatives can start thinking about their business and comparing 2 decisions. So, let's say you get to the point where you're just maxed out in terms of work. You do not want to spend that time either copying footage or responding to clients if there's something that you can automate in that regard too. So I think that's kind of another aspect of more effectively running your business is automating more steps and just taking a step back and seeing where you can put systems like that in.
Yeah, even simply like QuickBooks Online. You can make rules. Yeah. Go in there. Yeah. If you have the same bills every month, make a rule. You don't even have, you can do your accounting once a year, pretty much. Yeah. Like most businesses are simple. We're running through, 200, 300 transactions a month or more. Most businesses in the wedding creative space are maybe like making 5 to 10 transactions a month.
Right. 100%.
Like, get QuickBooks Online. Pay for it. Like, just give people money to make your life easier because, first of all, the liability is on them if they screw it up, and that's good for you. And again, like all the same, I always talk about, how can I mitigate risk?
Yeah.
How can I mitigate risk? How do I save time? I am confident in my ability to make money if someone else is going to get in trouble and if I have the time to do it. And most people, if you're in the place where you're like, I don't know how to make money with my time, maybe a lot of these tips won't be as helpful for you. But when you're in the place where you're like, if I only had more time, you got to start investing in your business. Not just, I think, money, but that does matter. You do need to put money into it. And even if it's a small amount, just to cover your services and automations and things like that. But also putting discipline into your business, putting structure into your business, so that, because that is really where, when people feel overwhelmed, it's more like this. 7 o'clock hits. They've been doing video games or whatever they're doing for the day. They had a call. They did all this stuff. And then they go, oh, shoot, I have to do this. Oh, I need more work-life balance, though, so I shouldn't do my accounting. It's like, and then it's like they sleep till 10 the next day. It's like, get up in the morning and do your accounting.
That's right.
And then at 5 o'clock, like Jared and I, pretty much at 5 o'clock, we go home.
I don't. I like to start work around 10 and then work till 7. That's
whatever.
That's
you go
what I
home
like.
whenever
But
you're done with your work.
But
day.
that's my discipline.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
and it can be whatever you want, but just make sure it's consistent.
Yeah,
That's
have a
the
discipline,
thing.
have a
Yeah.
pattern, whatever.
Yeah.
Well, and I think a lot of people kind of get in that position where, like you were talking about before, also maybe on the flip side where they just simply like they're working like crazy and they just don't have enough time. Well, people kind of become complacent in that area. They just sit there and they're constantly fighting to, catch up.
Yep.
And I know this isn't necessarily 100% related to financial, or this isn't 100% related to finances, but you can take a step back and look at your business and say, like, what am I spending my time on? And I think that's what a lot of accountants learn and understand, because you have to understand a lot about business, not just your taxes and financial reports, but you need to understand how people are spending their time. Because let's say we are creating a product, right? So we're spending time.
It's not
on
a
these
product.
Products. That's
it's not a commodity. Don't say that.
Yeah. So we're creating a wedding film,
Oh, the better.
and you shouldn't say product.
I mean, we call it a product. I know that there's a hot button issue in our industry, but like,
Yeah, I've heard that before.
depersonalizing everything always helps me with finances.
Yeah, and
So-
that's the thing too, because some of your smartest investors, they do not let their emotions run their decisions.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of people out there that will, people in cryptocurrency, what have you. They think that they know more than the average person, and they start making decisions based off of their personal reflection of themselves. So, I think that applies to your business as well, just running it like a business and not letting your emotions drive your decisions.
Evan, I want to ask you, because I think a lot of people in the last year have really been exposed due to coronavirus. And that's the subject of savings. Can you talk a little bit about maybe what you think most wedding videographers should be doing in terms of savings, whether it should be 3 months or 6 months or a full year worth of savings? Should it be in a personal account? Should it be under their business account? Maybe you could talk a little bit about how you kind of approach that.
Yeah, so I'll just kind of talk through, like I said, how I approach it. So what I essentially do, what we had talked about before is one of the things that we're trying to do is manage risks. So we created this LLC and we're trying to separate some risks. Well, one of the ways you do that is I personally pull as much money as I can out of that business. Now, I'm taking a couple of things into consideration. I'm taking, you do have to have discipline. If you are pulling money out of your company, you have to understand that your company is going to have future expenses. Now, in most cases, your company is going to generate future revenue to match those expenses. But I think the biggest thing is all that money that is sitting in your company is potentially subject. I mean, that is your company's assets. And that's what's going to be subject to more liability, because let's say you go out and you do get in a scenario in which you are being sued. The money that's sitting in your company can potentially be subject to seizure. So, with something like that, what I'm essentially doing is I'm managing my risk. I'm pulling as much money as I can out of my company, leaving enough for what I expect to be, let's say the next 3 months of expenses. But for the most part, I'm pulling that back into my personal account. And then from there, I think it's just having an understanding of where your company's heading, what your personal expenses are, and saving as much as possible. I know, people hear that a lot, but I think that means something different to everybody. But I'm personally making smart decisions with my money. I'm investing and letting my money work for me, not me work from my money. So
Yeah, well, the idea of like dead capital sitting there,
Yeah.
underutilized capital. Is like if you have money sitting in a bank and it's just sitting in a terrible checking account doing nothing, it's not making you money. Like you could be making money with your capital, and there should be a portion of your finances dedicated to making you money passively. We over here just have started a simple IRA for ourselves and all our employees, which is basically, you put in 3% as a company, they put in up to, as much as they want, but probably around 3%. And then that has interest that compounds every year. Do you think more wedding filmmakers, I know that for a long time, I never considered like, I could do a 401k for my wedding business, even if I'm working just by myself. I just never considered it. I don't know why. But because it's like, I'm not a company. I'm not a real company. But why should more wedding filmmakers be considering actually doing retirement savings like this, especially when they're so profitable?
Yeah, no, I 100% agree, because I think it's just the knowledge gap that's there, because people, I think I think generally people think of investing and things like that, that's reserved for the wealthy and the rich, but it's not in any way, because if you look at what you need when you retire, you need if you want to if you want to maintain the same lifestyle that you currently live, you essentially need that amount of money every year. One of the ways you're going to do that is just over the years by pulling out money and putting it into a 401k or investing it, so that money earns over time, as opposed to, let's say, you've been doing this for 40 years or so, and you get to the end of your career and all of a sudden you just have a big financial burden so that you can retire and stop working. You don't want to get into that scenario. You not only want to save, but you want that money to earn over the years.
Well, and wedding filmmaking is very, very physically demanding. You can't do it forever.
It is, yeah. That's why I kind of smiled when I said 40 years, because I honestly, that'd be tough. I mean, I think at that point you're more in a manager perspective.
I always feel like here on the Wedding Film School show, we're kind of like, I don't know. No, I'm not trying to like toot our own horn, but I always feel like we're like the wedding film dads. We're like, you should be saving more.
Save your money, boys.
But I saw a statistic the other day, and I was like, man, that's horrifying. That's like, and it was like 65% of Americans have less than $1,000 in savings in their accounts, or something crazy. Like, I don't know if that number is right, but I bet it's somewhere around there, right? And so just like finding a way to just like be sustainable, putting money aside, like we should be doing that, guys.
Well,
like,
and
that's
I keep
like
telling,
so obvious.
We were telling our guys yesterday with the simple IRA, because we're, I'm trying to get our employees like, please put into this. We want to match your 3%. Right. Don't be like, don't hold your money back.
And most of the people that work for us, and I think also most of the people that work in the wedding world, are like early 20s.
22-year-old people.
Dude.
Yeah. And we say like the statistic of like, if you put like basically around 10% of your money away from 22 until you retire, you will have $1 million in savings by the time you're 65.
100%.
If you are, especially if you put it into like a high yield account, like an IRA or something, and anyone can do this. So if you're making $50,000 a year as a wedding creative, and you're just like, I'm going to put 10% of this off the top, and that's how I budget. You have to budget savings. You can't just go, what if I have money left over? There's no such thing as money left over.
Well, and that's the thing too, and of course, speak to your financial advisor on this, just a little disclaimer, but one of the things that you can do very early on in your career is that you can take on more risks. So let's say, I'm 25. I'm 25 years old. All right, well, I need this money, and let's say I want to retire when I'm 65. Okay, well, I can let that kind of ride the wave of the ups and downs of the economy, as we've seen, in the last year. I'm sure a lot of people that had investments were scared at one point. But
now they're happy.
In general, yeah, I mean, if you're buying, you're happy. So, if you ride the ups and downs and you just look, I guess, as in general, stock goes up and down, but overall it goes up. So, if you have that long-term perspective in not only your company, but in investing, you're going to make better decisions, and you're going to have a forward-looking perspective instead of looking over the next 1-5 years. I think it's good to have a short-term goal as well as a long-term goal, but the retirement stuff definitely falls into that long-term goal. And I think that, not investing early on is probably one of the worst decisions, because you're going to get to a position where, let's say you've lost out on 20 years of investing, and you can do it right now. You can go to, you just type in retirement savings calculator. You plug that in and you see how much you're going to need for retirement. It's kind of scary, but I think it's a healthy fear, and just understanding that you need to be pinching your pennies where possible.
Well, wedding filmmaking is one of the best industries to save for retirement, because it's so profitable if you do it right. Yeah. And so you're able to put aside that money to, you have your money to live on, which is your salary. You have your bonuses, which I think could be used for like buying houses or high risk investment. And then you have your savings. And like very few businesses allow you to run a business that's profitable enough to parse your money out like that. And so that's why we love wedding filmmaking, and why we always encourage people like, hey, this is a great industry to get into, because you can actually make enough money, control your money, and actually like, it's not going to demand as much out of you resources wise. It will demand a lot of time, but it doesn't demand as much financially. And so it allows you to, if you're willing to put the time in, you can actually do a lot of really cool stuff.
Yep. Well, because, and that's the thing. I mean, we're putting in time, as opposed to, we're not creating a product. So we're not putting materials in. Time is the function of what we're creating. So, that's why it's so profitable, depending on how you look at it. I mean, I do recommend that people look at their time as a cost, because, like we were talking about before, every hour that I spend on one thing, I'm not doing something else. So, looking at it from, that perspective.
We always talk about opportunity cost on the show. It's such a big thing.
Yeah. So I actually covered that last week. And I think that's, something that's great for wedding filmmakers to understand, just because, if you're doing, and you're early on, it's one thing to take on opportunities for exposure. But as time goes on, every opportunity that you take on, I mean, that's essentially time that you could be making money as well. So it's just, you got to take that into your strategic approach for running your business.
So, Evan, do you have any resources, or maybe even like a good book that you would point people towards, either reading or a piece of software that you would consider or recommend people downloading?
Yeah, I mean, I think overall, just, one of your biggest resources, like you had mentioned before, the software that you're going to be using. So, one thing that I've found is just QuickBooks in general, and you can replace that with whatever name of software you're using.
FreshBooks, there's a lot of them.
Yeah, there's a ton of them. I'm not partial to any of them. That's just the one I've chosen. But overall, that's going to be one of your biggest resources when you're setting things up, because, I mean, that is their product, and their goal is to make it as easy as possible on you when you're putting your information in. So I think initially for a lot of people, it's just going to be having the foresight to set something up and a system in place. And in a lot of cases, those are going to guide you along the way. Even the tax software that you end up using, that's going to guide you along the way as well and point you in the right direction. So that would be my biggest piece of advice. And then, if you get plugged in with a CPA or something like that, they're going to be able to point you in the right direction further on, making decisions, getting to the right location.
Definitely. What about you, Jay?
Profit First is not a book that I would say is a replacement for a CPA or anything like that. But what I do like about it is like, it gives you a very simple strategy that will help guide you. I do know that the one thing I'll say about Profit First is you need to make sure your CPA is on board with it and understands what you're doing, because they do not like it when you start breaking your money into all these bank accounts. Like, CPAs have a certain way, and a lot of CPAs are stuck in their ways too. And so, like,
I agree.
You have to advocate for how you want to run your business. My opinion, for wedding filmmaking, it's a simple enough of a business that that doing something like Profit First is very effective. And just having that conversation with your CPA and saying, this is what I'm doing and how I'm doing it. They'll say, no, I'm not going to work with you, which could happen. Or they're going to be like, okay, let me learn how to do this. But just keep in mind, probably you're the authority on that little section of your business. They're the authority on tax laws and all those things.
Right.
But like, CPAs, just because they're a CPA doesn't mean that they know more than you about your business. And so keep that in mind.
100%.
Same thing with a lawyer too, I would throw in.
That's right. You've got to find one that works for you. I mean, you know, like you said before, CPAs are going to have different personalities, and you need to have one. And I'm not advocating for, you know, any specific CPAs or anything like that, but just overall, you need to find the right one that works for you and that understands, you know, maybe even the industry as a whole. They're out there, and I don't think all CPAs are going to be right for everybody. So it's just one of those things. Like when you have to pick the right one.
Yeah, advocating for your own thing. You don't need to be like, I'm dumb. I don't know anything. I can't tell them what I want. No, if it feels wrong,
Right.
you need to say it to the
100%.
CPA and let them know. And they're not like, in my experience, that's how I've gotten ahead. Is I've been able to explain people and I get what I want. But what about you?
Yeah, so the resource that I would probably point people to goes to the structuring of a person's business, because I think that is a hard thing for a person to decide, that really only you can decide. I mean, I know our lawyer is always like, you guys shouldn't be an S corporation because there's too much, and you guys like there's too many things that
He
are
wants to
involved.
save me $1,000 or something though. Who cares about
Yeah.
$1,000?
So we would even disagree with our own lawyer about what we should be. But you need to be the
Right.
person deciding these things. So educate yourself. The book that I would recommend is Start Your Own Corporation. It's a part of the whole Rich Dad, Poor Dad kind of series written by Garrett Sutton. That's
He has a podcast too, right?
I believe Rich Dad, Poor Dad kind of has, the Rich Dad, Poor Dad advisors have a podcast out there. I haven't listened to it.
Me
Have you?
either.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm not advocating for that. Listen to it. We don't care.
Yeah. But yeah, that was really the book that helped me decide and realize the potential of what our corporation could do. And so change our perspective.
It's been great. And this is what I'll say. Nothing has made my business more fun to run than being more profitable.
Yeah.
That's
Right.
what I'll tell you. And
Yeah.
like being more profitable, because profit, it's not about being rich. It's about
Right.
being safe.
Yeah.
Profit
Yeah.
means safety. Profit means security. And so for like, if you're a person who's dealing, most people I find they're like, I need work-life balance. What they're really feeling is the pressure. And I will
That's
say, like, getting disciplined in this area will relieve pressure. It'll make suddenly you won't be burnt out anymore. You'll have a good time again because you'll be thinking like, that person says no to you and you go, man, I got plenty of money coming in, and like all the things that come with having the safety and security of running a profitable business.
Well, and that's the thing. Like you know, one of the things you were talking about, profit, I think in general has just this negative connotation in general. But the thing is, that's going to allow you to do this for the long haul. And that, you know, you see people that are charging not what they should be charging for a wedding film. And I'm not talking about people in the beginning of shooting videos. I think that there are a lot of people in general out there as an industry that aren't charging what they need to. And you think about how hard they have to work to put food on the table, as opposed to if they were driving with profit first, they would be able to create a more successful business and take more time to themselves and be more creative because they have that breathing room.
Yep. It's people don't realize like we're emotional. We're not robots.
Yeah.
And so
Right.
All these people that hate profit. I just don't get their communistic.
it's
I-
honestly,
I
this is
never
what I'll say
understood
about
it.
you CPAs. Not you specifically, of course.
That's okay. That's fine.
But CPAs have gotten in such a lurch of trying to get rid of everyone's profit that they brainwash the whole world to think like you should get rid of all your profit. And it's like, it's ridiculous because like really, or people are like, oh, look at Amazon. They weren't profitable for like X amount of, they're being pumped with capital. It's not the same thing, guys.
Yeah. Looking at a lot of people say that, but they're not understanding that, you know, research and development goes into companies and all of that's kind of running through their company in the beginning. That's a more long term. That's another topic, but you know they're doing a lot of things to set them up for a long term approach.
Evan, we certainly have to have you on again, and
I'd love to.
I'd love to hear and direct people towards your YouTube channel and as well as your wedding films. Maybe tell people where they can find you and learn a little bit more and dive into kind of very specific topics.
So just to be clear, I'm not selling my CPA services in any way, but what I'm going to be doing in the future is posting more videos, bridging the gap between the financial space as well as the creative space, and just giving more information and resources through video content.
Very cool. And I can tell you from my own personal experience or lack of experience, finding people that are, talking about the subjects and broaching the subjects you're talking about, it's much needed. So thank you for what you're doing, man. I think the channel's awesome.
Absolutely.
Guys, make sure that you are giving this channel a like as well as heading over to Evan's channel, giving him a like
And a
sub.
subscribe and an alert bell and all the things.
And
That's right.
it goes a long way. We certainly appreciate it. Make sure that you are checking out other episodes of Wedding Film School. We're currently doing a series on why your business plan sucks, and it's really interesting. If you've been watching, the Wedding Film School show, we like to tackle the hard things as well. We like to talk about businesses as business structure. Kind of things that take a little bit more discipline. So make sure you're checking out that whole series. It's pretty great, as well as all the guests that we have on the Wedding Film School show as well. Make sure you're going over to Facebook and joining the discussion there, as well as checking out our weekly film reviews. We are doing every Thursday night, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you want to submit a film, make sure you're going to our website,
Weddingfilm.school.
Weddingfilm.school, and submitting your films there. Guys, thank you for checking out this episode, and we will see you next week right here on the Wedding Film School Show.